Hello, my name is Justin Shepard, and this is my presentation for Ms. Mill's English class. The title of my paper is Militant Feminism in the Workplace, Hidden Dangers. The program, or my field of study, currently is Business Management and Marketing. The reason I chose this topic was because there's differences between militant feminism and traditional feminism. At first, my article was supposed to be over traditional feminism, but as I researched it, I found out I kind of agree with a lot of their points. The differences were that one worked on destroying the power structure that men had built, on rebuilding it solely for the support of women. They replaced the goal of equality with the objective of reversed oppression. And they like to cast blame a lot. Like men were responsible for everything. No matter how good they were still tyrants. They were oppressors. And that if a man even admired what a woman looked like, that he was objectifying her. Rather than saying, oh, that woman looks very pretty, it became an insult to say something like that rather than a compliment. Traditional feminists were more along the lines of fighting for real equality, that they wanted to keep the current structure as it was. They just wanted a fair chance to rise up in it. And as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer that. Destruction is usually not the way to go about making change. It's usually one of the last resorts, and even then it's really kind of frowned on. So if you want to make change, you usually want to make change in the current power structure, because it's too much work, and a lot of times the system is there to be balanced. It's there to be equal. It just needs a little tweaking. Feminists wanted to tweak it. Essential feminists, or militant feminists, wanted to wreck it and remake it. And I had to tie this into a business field, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I would hire a feminist. If I were a human resources manager, I would hire a feminist to do a job. I would, because they want to work hard. They want to be viewed as equal, so they will perform equally. And as far as I'm concerned, in this day and age, that takes a lot of grit when you have to perform equal to someone who may have had this job longer than you. They might know it better than you. They might have been raised to perform it better than you, and you have to perform to meet that expectation. And that's a quality I would like to have in a worker. Somebody coming in and wanting to change everything and wreck everything and remake everything so it suits them is not a quality I would have in my team. When and if I ever start my own business, that is a personality flaw. You don't go into a business to change it to suit you. You change yourself for a couple hours a day to suit the business. It's part of a job. So this was why I chose that particular topic. I sort of began my article by pointing out that men and women generally want the same goals in life. They want to have a good job, they want to get paid well for their job, and they don't want to be held back because of something that's outside of their control. They want their pay rates to be commensurate with their education and experience at that job. I also point out that a lot of first world nations and second world nations, like the United States, are actually moving towards sexual equality more and more and more as time goes by. I guess my thesis is that, well, actually I kind of already stated my thesis in earlier statements where I said why I wrote this particular article, but basically boiled down to like a sentence is that my thesis is militant feminists were not fighting for the causes that their predecessors were, and they would go into a work environment and create more problems than existed prior to. From the body of my article, I started out, I used Roxane Gay's article, Bad Feminist. Loved this article. I used it a lot. Because she identifies herself as a feminist, but she also sort of, I don't know, she kind of takes a couple stabs at what she calls essential feminism, which is, you hate men, you hate sex, you adamantly protest the objectification of women, you're humorless. There were, oh yeah, and not to cater to the male gaze, which I'm not even honestly sure how that works. The differences she found were actually pretty radical. I use her a lot, but she calls herself a bad feminist because she's practically none of the things essential feminists call themselves. I also use the article Coalition and Control by Erin Kempker to tell how a group of feminists in the 1970s actually got an ERA ratified in Indiana. That very same group, actually disbanded due to differences in leadership and other things, but they stayed together until the ERA was ratified. So they accomplished their goal and then they dispersed, like most social movements that are aimed at changing something tend to do. I also use my sociology book, written by James Henslin, a lot. That entire chapter was a joke. I actually, in my chapter review questions for sociology, pointed out many of the hypocrisies Mr. Henslin decided to include in that particular chapter and previous chapters. My aim for that particular chapter question review was to destroy him. I never want him to be used as a school book ever again, because he was a pandering hypocrite, to put it politely. But I still used a lot of his resources, if nothing else, just to point out how terrible some of the statistics were used to scare impressionable women into becoming essential feminists. I also used Abigail Feely's article to tell how women have changed over the years. They've gained freedom because of traditional feminists. They're free thinkers. They're able to pick and choose what path they want in life. And this actually goes against what essential feminism or militant feminism wants them to do. They want them to act a certain way. They want them to speak and behave and think a certain way. And that's pretty much exactly opposite of what traditional feminists were trying to accomplish. They wanted the freedom of thought, the freedom of choice. But modern feminists nowadays think that utilizing free thinking and free choice is bad, that you're a bad feminist. And in Roxane's article, she actually states that that is implied to be a bad woman. If you don't fit their criteria, you're doing it wrong. And it's kind of weird how traditional feminists fought to get women out from under the oppressive thumb of men, and now modern feminists are fighting to keep them under the oppressive thumb of women. I actually synthesized a lot of these sources together really easily, a lot more easily than I thought I would. I do concede a couple points in my article. Predominantly that Peggy Drexler, who wrote an article about equal pay for equal work, I concede that that is a good point. Women are paid less than men. However, I do dispute it by pulling up statistics from, I think, 2 or 3 other sources that state entirely different numbers than what she states. She says that women are paid as low as 72% to 77%. And another source says 78 to 84. And another source says as high as 92% of what men make. I also synthesize this with Henslin because he states that 50% of the pay difference is because women choose less paying jobs than men. Men are more likely to become engineers or construction workers, and women are more likely to become nurses and teachers. I guess that's just their path in life, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but obviously a teacher may not be paid as much as an engineer. And it's not really fair to compare the two. It's like apples and carburetors. Yeah, carburetors. I concluded the article that I wrote by stating that feminism in its traditional sense was something I would support. It's something that if I ran a business, I would hire a feminist. I would, in a heartbeat. There would be no reason for me not to. But I would not hire a militant feminist because, as I say in my article, one of the closing statements is that a feminist would likely prefer to shake your hand for giving her the opportunity to interview with you at a job. But a militant feminist would want you to confess your sins and admit to your privileged position in the patriarchy and kneel to her. I actually end by saying that I have a bad knee and I much prefer a handshake. Thank you for watching. My citations will be in the description below, and good luck with all your finals this week.